Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my kitchen. As you can see, I'm feeling much better, and life is going on in the middle of our pandemic. I'm trying to be a little bit better about taking these videos, trying not to just be the talking head like I was last time, but I'm not really doing much better. Um, I've been grading, and I'm very impressed with how y'all are doing on your quizzes. Some of the assignments, some of you are doing really good, and some of you are slogging through. One day this week, and I'll put an announcement up on your announcement board. It'll either be to probably Thursday or Friday. I'm going to try to be on Skype for 2 hours. And that way, if you have questions or you're just sick of looking at your four walls or you want somebody to talk to, or have questions about your assignment, Skype is tied to my cell phone number, my Google cell phone number, which is the 405-928-8068. But also, I know how to Google video now, video chat. So if you want to call me, I'm willing to talk to you. I'm working on all my classes. I've spent a lot of time making masks to go to New York, and I haven't gone gray yet, as you can see, thank God. Um, but I hope all of y'all are safe and healthy and happy. We are entering the next phase of the class. We are entering Tsarist, the end of Tsarist Russia, and going into the Soviet component, which is really interesting because I took a 4-week class on World War II myths and legends that ended last Friday. So I felt very much like a student because I kind of forgot about it the first 2 weeks while I was sick. And then when I finally logged on, I had a lot of work to do. And not only that, I felt like a student on Friday morning when I was locked out and nobody could help me. I did complete my class about 15 minutes before the due deadline, so I did earn my certificate in my class. That was really interesting because I felt like I had a really good handle on the Soviet aspect of the war, but I did learn a lot of things, and I also can identify tanks by pictures now. So learned a lot about Blitzkrieg and the concept of Blitzkrieg and how the Soviets adapted to Blitzkrieg. It was a fun class, but really, on top of everything else, probably not the smartest thing to do right now. But I earned my credits, so I'm happy. Anyway, so we are going to enter the Soviet phase, and you have your who you think is the really inspirational leader for the revolution. And there are arguments made for all three. And I'm looking forward to reading those here as they start coming in. I start grading them. Oh, I can see my broom in the background, so you can tell I rode my broom to work today. No, sweeping the floor. I do miss everybody. I miss not going to class. And I was surprised to hear that we will not have on-campus summer school either, that we will have virtual graduation. So for those of you who are graduating, they're going to have a virtual graduation, but students won't be allowed. We will invite you back for next year's graduation. So I hate to hear that. Also, remember that enrollment is going on. You can enroll online, or you can email Kathy Ogle at cogle@rose.edu, and she can advise you and enroll you from home. We are all working from home now. School is on lockdown. So you can do that. Anyway, I want to talk about the Soviet system for a little bit because we kind of have this sense that the revolution happened and everything went great right from the start. The revolution is a disaster, an absolute disaster in every way, shape, and form. There is no, let me move this back a little bit. It's warm out today, can you tell? There is no one moment where they could sit there and go, oh, this is great, this is working. Once Russia enters into revolution in 1917, remember there's two phases of the revolution. You have the February Revolution where Trotsky and his Red Army took over the Tsar's palace and all the government buildings in St. Petersburg, forcing the Tsar to abdicate. This is after the assassination of Rasputin. I hope all of y'all enjoyed Alan Rickman as Rasputin. He's such a great actor. I miss him. Um, and then you have kind of a provisional government run by Kerensky, which is really intriguing. Kerensky grew up in the same town as Lenin. They are both from the same town, and interesting how they both grew up in the same area, same town, and yet came out with different ideologies. Lenin spent much of his youth living under house arrest and then forced into exile. His brother was one of the assassins executed for the assassination of the Tsar. So Lenin has a much different perspective of the Tsar and Russia than Kerensky does. Kerensky's family is part of the the bourgeoisie middle class. But Kerensky really does not have a hold on power. The Germans are just punching the Russians. And then Lenin shows up with his peace, land, bread, and you have massive revolution. There was a clip I wanted to show you in class from Dr. Zhivago. So if you get a chance to watch Dr. Zhivago, it really shows the absolute chaos of the revolution. But there's a scene in there where the mutineers are leaving the battlefield, and here comes the Tsarist army telling them to go back to their positions, and they end up shooting the leaders of the army, and you kind of just have chaos. And so you also have to remember that the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks didn't get along, that Trotsky and Lenin didn't get along, that you have kind of these insurgent Soviet armies. Remember, Soviet means commune. So don't have this sense of one big country all unified. Every different Soviet, remember the name of the country, will eventually become United Soviet Socialist Republics. It means that all these little Soviets became part of the republic. And so when we are looking at them, you have the Ural Soviet is not obeying what the Moscow Soviet, which is led by Lenin, is telling them to do. And they're not listening to Trotsky either. And so you kind of have chaos here in the revolution. So you have a revolution that's in the country to begin with, and then you have a revolution among the revolutionaries, and then you have civil war, because now you're going to have the Red Army versus the White Army, because even though the Tsar and his family are massacred, you're going to see the first of the civil unrest where trying to put somebody back on the throne, or at least stop the revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. This also includes an Allied invasion in Siberia in 1918 by the United States government and Great Britain and others, which was an absolute failure. But from that point on, it will put the United States and Russia on a very awkward footing. The Soviets will never forget that we tried to invade and restore the Tsar. So not only you have the White Army and the Red Army, you also have insurrections all through Russia. Not everybody's on board with the same thing. So you have a lot going on. From 1917 to 1921, Russia is at war with itself. How it survived is beyond me. And probably beyond most of the Soviets. And then they enter the starving times of 1919 to 1921, where there's not enough food, where there's not, food's not getting to the cities, the railroads aren't working, the factories aren't working, you have mass starvation. You also have the revolution, which is, killing the bourgeoisie and resettling property and all sorts of things. So it is just mass chaos. Finally, Lenin is able to put this together and create a government in 1922, and then he starts stroking on us. By 1922-23, Trotsky is so exhausted from years of revolution. Remember, Trotsky's been doing this a lot longer than Lenin. While Lenin was living in exile, writing his books, writing his manuscripts, writing his letters, Trotsky was on the front lines. Trotsky is exhausted. He's tired. He's head of the Red Army. But he is Lenin's right-hand man, even though they are not seeing eye to eye. And up through the ranks, we see the rising of Joseph Dashvili, better known as Joe Stalin, or Stalin, as the Russians refer to him. And he, as Lenin becomes more and more sick, he kind of displaces Trotsky in Lenin's trust. So that when Lenin does die, even though the Russians say Lenin never died, I'll explain that in a minute, they create a troika. And really don't pay attention to this 2-year troika. Trotsky and Stalin are 2 of the 3 corners. Doesn't matter who the third one is. This will fall, and 1925, Stalin will become head of the Soviet Union all by himself and will rule until he dies after World War II. And so when we are looking at this period, don't have this sense that things are going well at all. They're not. Plus, one of the things that's been overlooked a lot through history is we often focus on Stalin, and not to take away from how brutally bloody Stalin was. He was the killer of the 20th century by far. But, and here's a big but, we lose track of how many were killed under Lenin in the beginning of the purges. And so as we start looking at this, my next lecture that I will do, and I'll upload it probably tomorrow, will be on dissension and how this all came to be. But also we'll do one on the purges and look at just the absolute disaster that Russia is trying to go through itself. And you have to think as we go into this phase, because one of your final questions, because you have studied a lot about first the Varangians, all the way through the Rurik dynasty, through the time of troubles, and then through the Romanov dynasty, and Catherine the Great, and Peter the Great, and all of that. And I'm sorry, I'm trying not to use my hands. Now we're going to enter the realm of Stalin. And today they live, with Tsar Vladimir Putin. And one of your final essay questions is, does Russia run better with an iron fist and a velvet glove, or an iron fist, or a benevolent dictator? And that's something to think about. So keep that in mind. And think about that Germany, when Russia pulls out of the war, and this is food for thought also, and is key to World War II, when Russia pulls out of the war in the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, Germany gains a huge chunk of Russia. Look at the map in your book, and you will see that the Treaty of Versailles will take all this land away from Germany and give it, well, they won't give it back to Russia. They're going to create Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. They're going to create other countries. And so keep that in mind, that when the Germans feel like they have rightful claims to the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, because they did win World War I with the Russians. The Russians lost that war to them. And in Russia, they do not really think of World War I. They call it the Forgotten War. So, because it slides right into revolution. So, all right, that's it for today. And I'll come back in a couple of days now that I'm feeling better. And you can see my kitchen. I sit here, my fountain's right here, my sewing stuff's right here. Also, for those of you who have not heard and are history majors, last Thursday, I found out from Joe's family that one of my dearest, oldest friends in the whole world, Joe Anatebby, passed away suddenly on Wednesday. And so those of you who have had Professor Anatebby, I do have contact information for his family if you'd like to reach out to his children. As you know, he was a single father for many years and a kind and sweet and gentle man, and we will miss him dearly. He went in for some tests because he'd been having some stomach trouble and found out he had stage 4 colon and stomach cancer on Monday, and he started running a fever on Tuesday, and he died on Wednesday. And so on that sad note, I will say end this for today. All right, thank you. Miss you.